This is the Sick'em Podcast, powered by Rogue Media Network. The Sick'em Podcast is a production of Baylor Athletics. Now, here are your hosts, Brooke Bednarz and the voice of the Bears, John Morris.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Sick'em Podcast, powered by Rogue Media Network, a production of Baylor Athletics. Glad you're with us today. John Morris, Brooke Bednarz as normal, but not so fast. A little bit normal, but a little bit abnormal today. Also, Brooke, you are the co-host of this Sick'em Podcast from its inception.
Yes.
And
very thankful for that.
Yes. We'll talk about the history of that, but you are also our guest today, and a guest of honor, as you are, if folks don't know, moving on from Baylor and Baylor Athletics, and this week is actually your last week on the job full-time with us in Baylor.
Yes, it is the definition of bittersweet. I know a lot of people say that, but because of the nature of this move and the opportunities that are ahead of me, it's definitely bittersweet because it's not like I, was looking to leave Baylor. I've really come to love Baylor, which all my Texas Tech friends that I graduated with, I'm sure will love hearing. But I'm really proud to be wearing the green and gold and still made sure to wear it today on my last day. So.
That's good. Well, it'll be fun to, when I brought this idea up to you, I said, let's do a This Is Your Life, Brooke Bednarz. So we're going to let you, share some memories of your time with us on these podcasts, other interviews, some of the work you've done here. And that'll be fun. It's a good way for us to say thank you, too, for your good work for the last 3 years, almost to the day, right?
Almost
3
to
years
the day.
This week.
I have a good history with that.
Yeah.
It's exactly 3 years ago today that or close to today that I started this week. And there's been a lot of amazing stories and memories that I've been able to be a part of while I've been here. But when you did look at me and ask me if I wanted to do this, I remember just kind of looking at you like, oh, you're going to turn the tables on me.
That's right.
I normally am the one asking the questions.
Yes.
So
not that you haven't turned the tables on me.
Of course.
A time or two. So.
Well, that was my job,
I know.
You're the voice of the Bears, got to mix it up.
That was very fun. All right, and people are saying, okay, why are you leaving? Where are you going? What are you doing?
Yes.
Another big announcement, if folks don't know, you're engaged, you're getting married in January, and Brock is part of he has a new job in Houston, and that's the big part of the reason for your leaving.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I first got here, it was finally, before this I did TV, and I had crazy work hours, and dating wasn't fully possible. It wasn't impossible, but my schedule never really aligned with anyone that had a normal job. And so the dating didn't really ever work out. And then I started working here at Baylor. We still have crazy hours here, but a little bit more normal. And I was fortunate enough to meet Brock Meckelborg. He, at the time, was the operations manager at McLean Stadium. He went to Baylor for undergrad. He got his graduate degree from here as well. So even if I'm leaving, I'll still be a Baylor fan for life.
Nice.
And then he became the operations manager at the stadium, like I said, and he was that for 3 years. He was doing that job when I met him. We became friends for a year, and then we dated for a year. Really got to know him well through quarantine and COVID because we were neighbors 3 doors down.
Right.
So that was fun to find out and kind of be in our little bubble of the very few people that we would see in person. And I was very thankful for that because I did live alone. And so got to know him and his roommate really well. And then, now we started dating, and now we're getting married. He had the amazing opportunity to become the operations manager at NRG Park down in Houston. So that's where the Texans play, that stadium, the NRG Center, where the rodeo, majority of the rodeo is held. Like the livestock shows and things like that. And then also the arena and technically the Astrodome, but not much goes on in there these days. So that was an amazing opportunity for him. We got engaged in February, and so we're planning our wedding for here in Waco in January. Very excited for that. But we thought we had it all figured out, and God laughed and gave him this amazing opportunity. And so now we're headed down to Houston. He's already there, and I'm on my way.
So Brock's already there. You're engaged. You're getting married. So you start looking for jobs,
Yes.
and lo and behold, you found a great job that ties right in with Brock's there.
Yes, it does. People joked when he started telling people he got that job, because technically, Baylor, we rent McLean,
Sure.
even though
Right.
it's home.
Right.
Just the way it's worked out with the city, Baylor's the biggest client
Yeah.
of McLean Stadium is how we joked about it. And so when he started telling people he was getting this job at NRG, of course they asked, well, what's Brooke going to do? And one of the biggest clients behind the Texans alone is the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo.
Sure.
So people were saying, like, oh, how funny would that be if Brooke got a job with the rodeo? We'd still be neighbors. Right now we're across the river. And lo and behold, I was able to get a job with the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. So very excited to be joining them. But I'll be working out of the NRG Center and Brock out of the NRG Stadium. So we're switching up across the river for across the parking lot.
That's great. That's a great job for you. Congratulations
Thank
on
you.
that. Yeah.
Thank you. I will share a fun story.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to tell them this yet, but I grew up very competitive. I grew up playing sports. Every sport, tried it out at least one time. And when I was 9, my family went to the Mesquite Rodeo. It was the first time I'd ever been to a rodeo. And we had no idea that this was coming, but they invite all the kids down to catch the calf for the calf scramble.
Oh, yeah.
So they tie that bandana on the back of a calf's tail, and, all the kids chase them around and try to get it. There were 2 calves, and I caught one of them. I caught the girl calf.
Yeah.
And so John, no joke, from the ground up, this trophy's probably about 3 feet tall.
Golly.
And it is, to date, the biggest trophy I have ever received. And it was, I was playing club soccer. It was in big time tournaments, basketball, you name it, played all the way through high school. And that is still the biggest trophy I've ever had. And so when I got this job with the rodeo, my dad called me and was kind of laughing already when I answered the phone, and he goes, of course you're going to the rodeo.
Yeah,
it was meant to be. You have that, and we still have that trophy.
Yeah.
So when I went home this past weekend, of course it was pulled out so I could
Nice.
acknowledge the trophy and that life's come full circle.
That's a great story. So in your new office,
should
gotta put that trophy in there, right? It's a great story to tell.
It is. Still have the bandana tied at the top.
Very cool.
It was pretty funny.
That's great. And you were how old? 9?
I was 9.
9 years old.
Yeah. So about 20 years ago at this point, 20
That's
years
pretty
ago,
good.
it caught the calf.
Very cool.
But
wedding is January 28th.
Yes.
Right? All right. So that's coming. You are, so this week is your last week, as I said, full time with Baylor Athletics. But we're not letting you go completely.
Thankfully.
Yeah, which is good for us and good for our listeners and viewers, because you are going to continue working on a contract basis, I guess, on our tailgate shows, which you put a lot of work into. So I'm glad that works out, that you'll be able to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very, very excited to have the opportunity to finish what we started. It's not fun ever having to leave anything in the middle of the season, and we're exactly halfway through with the home games here at McLean. And so to have the opportunity to come back for Kansas State, and TCU through November is going to be an amazing opportunity to, finish what we started and hang out with you guys and our analysts a little bit more, and just keep talking Baylor football as they continue to progress.
All right, and you have the perfect background to do that, because I think folks know our tailgate show, this is for home games, is televised and broadcast on radio, and you have a television background, and you put all this work into our lineup, our rundown for that first hour of the tailgate show. Folks don't realize how much work that is. That is a lot of work that you spend on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I used to work in TV, was able to do news for a little while and then switch over to sports. I was very glad for that transition. Never will regret my time in news, but I was always ready to get back into sports. And so when the opportunity for the tailgate show presented itself back during the pandemic, actually, when we only had, I think it was 25% allowed to be in the stands. It was our way to bring Baylor football to everyone who couldn't be there with us. And, yeah, it's been an amazing opportunity, but it definitely is pretty much my full-time job in the fall, other than this podcast.
Yes.
But building that show, going to Coach Aranda's press conferences, finding those storylines, seeing how everything correlates with our marketing perspective and any games we have, like Go Gold or a military appreciation or things like that. Just making ways to tie all of those things together while still talking and analyzing the game ahead. So it's been a lot of fun, and I'm very fortunate to be able to continue that. Do want to thank the Rodeo for allowing me to come back and finish that out as well. So very, very much so looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm glad that worked out. So you'll continue with that, sort of working remotely and then coming in for those games and those tailgate show broadcasts. You know, as you were talking about, this started during the pandemic. Remember that year when it was limited attendance at McLean Stadium, we were doing the tailgate show inside the stadium, on the concourse there, because there wasn't any reason to be out at Touchdown Alley because there was nobody out there.
There's no tailgating.
Yeah. Isn't that kind of strange to remember back on that?
It's really crazy to remember, first and foremost, just being at the games wearing the masks.
Yeah.
You know, we were very socially distanced. We were limited. Sometimes if people watch the show now, majority of the time we actually have 4 people on the desk. We never did that.
Yeah.
Then it was only 3, and we were all very separated, sat down, took our masks off. Everyone around us was wearing masks. And yeah, it was surreal. It was also hard to try to bring that excitement, you know, to everyone, knowing they couldn't be there and see it in person.
So different.
Yeah, and I just remember wanting so badly to see the line run again and to see the stadium full and to have that sellout like we did last week. It didn't end the way we wanted it to, but to have that game and that atmosphere back was really special. But yeah, I mean, when I think back, I've only been here for 3 years, but it seems a lot longer than that because of that pandemic. There's been a lot of change from that moment. You know, I still remember in March we had Coach Drew as the first Zoom press conference, and it was only me, David Kay, and my boss Chris Humphreys and Coach setting that up and making it virtual for the very first time. And I have a picture from that day of a Clorox wipe canister thing, because I was like, we really need to make sure that we clean everything up, and little did we know what was coming.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's been really neat to see from that point what happened, how we adapted and adjusted and got to where we are now
through the pandemic. And actually, as I think about it now, the Sikkim podcast began.
Yes, it
did.
As
sort of a way to reach out to our fans during the pandemic also.
It really did. I remember going back and forth. We were, of course, sitting at home, trying to figure out the name, what it should be, and finding out I was going to get to work on it with you, and how we were going to do this. And our first several episodes were via Zoom, because there was no coming in anywhere.
In the same room.
No. And then even if we did, like as we started coming, I remember Coach McGraw. We went and visited him at the golf facility, and we were very separated.
Yeah.
We were always making sure we were 6 feet apart. And now to be able to just walk in a room and sit down and, laugh and share stories has been really special. But when this first started, I'd never listened to a podcast. I'll admit that now. I was not a podcast listener, and more or less ever thought I would be a host of one. And so when the opportunity came, I was like, okay, we'll figure this out.
Yeah.
And I am confident in saying that this is the part that I will miss the most. I'm long-winded, as most of you all have become aware of. But I love sharing stories, and the hard part, whether it was with TV or the tailgate show or any feature I do for ESPN Plus, they're time constraints. and I can't have a 10-minute story because none of y'all would want to sit around and watch it. But when I do these interviews and we get to hear all these great things, it's like, okay, Ben Sims said 15 amazing things, but I only have time to say 3.
Right.
And so I end up sharing all of those other 12 amazing things that he said to all my family and friends. And I'm like, oh, every time I tell it, that would have been a great story.
Exactly.
That would have been a great story. And people aren't aware. So this podcast, while I never thought I wanted to do it, has been amazing because we get to ask those questions and we have time to hear those answers. And so I am a huge podcast fan now.
Nice. Yeah, I'm the same way. Exactly. All right, I want to get some of your favorite interviews, podcasts, subjects, things you've got to do while you've been here, okay? So we want that is straight ahead. We are brought to you by Rogue Media Network. I've had the privilege of calling games, telling stories about Baylor athletics for a long time. Storytelling is an art, and there's a network in town doing just that. Rogue Media Network has produced over 80 original podcasts and shows ranging from comedy, true crime, business, and sports. If there's a story to tell, Rogue Media Network is telling it. You can find this podcast and all the other great Rogue Media Network shows on Spotify, on Apple, on YouTube, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. And you and I, Brooke Bednarz, our co-host / guest / honoree today, her final week here at Baylor. And I'll just say this, you know this, but boy, it's been fun working with you. And we're going to miss you. We're going to continue with the podcast, but it'll change, without your input and without you being a part of it.
Well, thank you so much. And I do want to take a moment to say thank you, not only to you for this opportunity to say goodbye and to reflect and remember all these amazing opportunities, but also say thank you from the top down to Mac Rhodes, Jovan Overshone, Justin Hoff, everyone that I've had the opportunity to work with in between, and especially my boss that brought me here, Chris Humphreys. The opportunities that Baylor gave me were unceasing. It just kept coming, blessing after blessing, and I am a true Baylor fan now, and I can't say I was right before I got this job.
Yep.
I was willing and ready to wear the green and gold, and it changed my life. I will always remember and appreciate the time that I was able to be here, and like I said, it's bittersweet because it's not necessarily that I'm wanting to leave Baylor, but that my next chapter with Brock is in Houston, and I'm very excited for that, of course, but it's bittersweet to be leaving. So Thank you to everybody for the opportunity to work here with all of you guys. It's been amazing.
Very nice, very heartfelt. Give you a chance to say a final goodbye at the end of the podcast. But what are some of the things that you think of? I did give you a heads up on this ahead of time. What are some of the things that have been very memorable for you, either the podcast or feature stories or just interviews you've had a chance to do during your time here?
Yeah, well, it was neat to kind of go back and, anytime you leave, you save all your stories and you transfer them off your computer. And so I was going back through all the stories I've done. And the first one, it might have been my first feature. I can't quite remember, but Freddie Gillespie, and just his story from D3 to D1 and how he had really never picked up a basketball and more or less had really never done an interview to that extreme before. But just to see his growth and how he became and all the work he put in, and hearing Coach Drew talk about like how he was missing block shots or missing dunks even, and how he grew and developed and then, had the opportunity to play in the NBA and be drafted. All that is just, such a special such a special story. And so Freddie Gillespie definitely kicked things off for me here. In a big way, not just because he's super tall.
Yeah, but
Yes.
And isn't that great? I mean, doesn't that speak to how great this job is by getting to know him and then being able to tell his story and share his story with the Baylor fans?
Absolutely, and it's really neat, to sit down with them because I feel like a lot of times people, when they see, news stories or our tailgate show stories or anything on ESPN Plus, it's like, oh, well, someone else probably edited that or did the interview. And the really cool part about this job is that we're the ones doing the interview. I'm the one sitting down in that chair across from them, walking them through this interview, giving them tips and tricks along the way, and hearing their story. And when they get kind of, caught up in an emotion or stumble over their words, work through that with them to help them be able to tell their story in the best way. And then I have the honor of taking that story. And I always say they're not mine. I might be the one presenting them, but it's not my story. It's their story, and I'm just kind of the tools that they're using to tell it, which is a huge honor every time they allow me to do so. But Freddie, to see him come in, not really know what I was about to do. My job was new. I tried to explain to him what I was doing, and I was like, I'm on your team, just the opportunity to walk him through his story and to hear how he really didn't start playing basketball till late, and then, started in D3, and then the opportunity came to move to D1 and come to Baylor, and he was like, I got to try this out. But then when he got here, we have big-time scholarship players that he was working behind, and he spent a lot of time in the gym, and then to see it come to fruition, unfortunately, when Tristan got injured, but he was able to step up and really make a name for himself, and to see that support from Tristan also, because they had all seen the hard work behind the scenes, and so I was able to give a glimpse into that. Yeah. It was really special.
That's cool. So that's a story when you talk about it, we talk about it, people say, oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Which is nice, which is a great compliment.
Thank you.
The other one I'm sure people remember is you did a great story with Jared Atkinson and his mom.
Yes, that was special. That was back during the 2020 football season when we didn't have very many fans in the stands, and people were, being very cautious of where they went. Jared, of course, when he was a sophomore, I think, he had taken the spring off because his mom had cancer. And so Coach Rule at the time was the head coach and allowed him to go home and to be with her, and was really the primary person who was able to take her to and from appointments and things like that, because their dad was still working to provide for the family, and his sister was off at school and wasn't able to do that. And so for Jared and his mom, that was an opportunity to become really close. But I came to find out that there wasn't a whole lot of talking of feelings. It was more of kind of attacking in the business perspective. Get this done. We're gonna knock out cancer. So she overcame that, and that was amazing. But then right when the pandemic started, she was diagnosed with breast cancer again. She's still battling it today. But that season was really tough for Jared because it was the pandemic, and it was right in the middle of the football season starting. It was his senior year, and he couldn't be at home to be taking her to those appointments again. Instead, it was all over Zoom and FaceTime because he had to be careful. He was around the team, and the team was being really cautious, but we were trying to keep the team healthy at the same time, and he didn't want to make his mom any sicker if he accidentally had COVID. And so, we all remember those days of just the anxiety of what if. And, so he had to stay away from the person he wanted to be around the most and help her. So I was able to do a Zoom interview with both of them to kind of share this story and what it was like. And they both knew I was doing interviews with the other one, but I guess they didn't talk about it. And so I did 2 fantastic interviews via Zoom and put the story together. And when it aired, I sent it to them. It airs in the tailgate show first, and then I sent it to them, and I got a phone call from her, Monique Atkinson, shortly after, and she was nearly in tears and said that, she just wanted to thank me for doing that story. And I said, well, of course, thanks for taking the time to share it. You didn't have to do that. And she said that hearing Jared's thoughts about what it was like for her to have cancer for a second time, she hadn't heard those before because Jared hadn't opened up to her personally. And I think we can all, understand what that's like, not wanting to make anyone feel more sick or guilty for stuff that they can't control. But so just Jared, that speaks volumes to him, trusting us with his story, being vulnerable, and kind of, speaking the truth. And the opportunity that story was able to provide their family to grow closer together through all of this was really special to be a part of.
Wow, very memorable. Another one I remember I loved was Tommy Bowman.
Yeah, Tommy.
What a great guy. Yeah.
He's fantastic. I'll start this one out because it's a joke. He sent me, I was doing his story, and of course I asked for pictures. You know, he played back in the day, and I said, "You got any pictures you can send me?" And he sends me a picture.
I know what's coming.
And he says, 3 guesses on which one's me, and the first 2 don't
Team
count.
picture.
If you don't know what I'm talking about, Tommy Bowman was the first scholarshiped black student athlete here at Baylor University. He played basketball for us, and that story, I mean, from him talking about it like that and just joking with us and getting to hear his perspective of what that was like, how his team giving them credit for how they treated him, hearing some of the difficulties that he had when they went on the road and played other places. It was really neat to hear from his perspective and how that's, you know, transformed his life and how he never really thought of being the first. This struck me.
Mm-hmm.
He never really thought being the first, it's not an accomplishment. He's like, it's just a fact.
Wow.
It's just a fact. It's not going to change yesterday, today, or tomorrow. But to be that person who opened that door and was the first to walk through it, he does see that as an honor. And when you look at all of our student athletes here today, and you know that he's been able to kind of meet and speak with, it's really, he told me how neat it is for him to see that, because it looked very different when he was a student athlete here at Baylor. But yeah, so to hear and share his story was super, super special. Also really neat to speak with his teammate, David Sibley, to talk about what that was like for him and as a teammate. And then Carol Dawson. Carol Dawson's interview, most interviews, if people don't know, when you do an interview for a story like this, it's maybe 10, 15 minutes max, and that's pretty long. Carol Dawson's interview with me was 45 minutes.
Oh, wow.
45 minutes of just chatting and talking and getting to know. And I mean, when I say I had the hardest time picking through those sound bites and what to include, there's a reason that story is 6 minutes long.
Yeah.
And it's because it deserved to be 6
Sure.
minutes long. And it was so special, down to he was just driving through on some scouting. He was the recruiter. Carol Dawson was the recruiter. He went on to do amazing things with the Rockets down in Houston, was their GM for a long time. But when he first started out, he was the assistant basketball coach here at Baylor. And he was on a recruiting trip, and he needed some gas. So he pulled over in this small Texas town, East Texas, and he had a Baylor sticker on his car. And the guy pumping the gas was like, "What do you do at Baylor?" And he said, "Oh, I'm a basketball coach." And the guy pumping the gas goes, "Well, we got the best player in the state right down the street." And Carol, of course, that struck his attention.
Sure.
He's like, "Oh, what?" And he had never heard of anyone in this town playing basketball. And at the time, Tommy Bowman's aspirations were just the junior college down the street. And so he said, "Okay, well, where is this house?" So he gets directions, last house on the left, down that road. So he gets in his car full of gas, and he literally just drives to this house. Has no idea who's going to be there.
Yeah.
And Tommy's mom was sitting on the porch shelling peas. And so Carol Dawson gets out of the car, and he walks up to her, introduces himself, and sits on the porch for an hour and a half while they waited for Tommy to come back, shelling peas. And Tommy says that in that hour and a half, Mrs. Bowman was sold on Baylor, and that if Tommy hadn't decided to go there, she would have had some choice words for him. So a lot of credit to that story and whoever that man was pumping gas, because it got us one heck of a basketball player and an amazing story to tell.
Yeah, very cool. That's great. Another thing you mentioned to me ahead of time was you get to work with and around student athletes, and in this area, you help them develop and help them grow, just in being more comfortable doing interviews.
Yes. We practice with them on and off the field in the strength room, getting those workouts in. We have areas of mental health and nutrition and things like that. But as they develop in all of those areas as student athletes, they start getting these big interviews. They go to Big 12 media days, and they have these big opportunities to to speak with people and big time reporters from ESPN and on, live broadcast and this and that. And so when we're doing our little interviews in content days or things like that in the summer, it's really neat to see them come in as freshmen, very nervous, very unsure of how to say their answers and what to say and where to look and how to sit, and then to see them grow into seniors, 5th year, senior, 6th year, COVID, who knows, however long they've been here, but to grow into that, their final year with us, and then have them walk in and not only be confident in what they're doing, but be comfortable in it and trust that, we can tell you our story and trust Baylor with our story. And that's really special. That's really special for me to earn that trust. But it's also really neat when they come in, halfway through their time here and they're like, okay, so I practiced this, but I did not say what I meant to say. How do I approach this? Or if someone hits me with a hard question, if I pause, does that look bad? Or, in asking me those questions, because I've been the one asking the questions before and they know that I'm on their team now. And so to see that growth and to see their reaction when they see their story come to fruition is been really special and really cool to be a part of. Because, we're at a university, and while we're not teachers and professors, we do have students that we get to work with, and that's our area that we can see them grow in. Yeah. So it's been neat.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
That's one of the real joys of being in-house, being in the athletic department, is having those opportunities with student athletes and doing what we can, you know, to help prepare champions for life. So
absolutely.
Really fun.
And I do want to make one more note. I purposely didn't tell you that this is one of my favorite moments because I didn't want you to have a heads up. Of course, got to throw you a loop one more time. But one of my other favorite moments was surprising you with your 400 consecutive called football games last year.
It was a surprise, yes.
But talk about being on the inside and having that opportunity to reach out to people that you first worked with way back, at the radio station when you were in high school. And then Frank Fallon's son, the former voice of the Bears, or the original. I know that's how you like to say that.
Yes.
And just to have have the opportunity to have Mac Rhodes in there and all the other Big 12 announcers, and of course so many of your family and friends and coworkers here at Baylor. But to surprise you with that video is probably in my top 3.
That's nice.
Just because it's been such a blessing to work alongside you and to learn. And as someone who didn't go to Baylor, I've been very upfront about that. Having to come in and do this podcast from the get-go. And be like, I was not here for that.
Right,
I don't know those stories. And to have had the opportunity to do this podcast with you and to learn all those stories and to hear all those memories and to have you just at the drop of the hat be able to be like, yes, on that game, this is what happened. It's evident that you called 400
we're
plus
a team.
consecutive.
Let's say we're a good team together.
But that's been really special. So
that was fun. Now the
really
funniest part,
enjoyed.
thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
And thank you for doing that. It still does mean the world to me. But the funny part was you had to track down all these people
yes.
who I have in my phone. I've got all of them.
I know.
But you couldn't come to me and
ask
say,
you.
hey, I need the number for Steve Bertram or Dave Hunziker or Brian Estridge, right?
That
you had
was
to track
fun.
them all down.
Yeah, it took a while. Steve Bertram, that one is probably the best story.
Yeah.
So I had to Google him.
Yes.
I got his name. I don't remember how I got his name.
Steve is a guy that works at WHIR in Danville, where I grew up.
Yes.
And he, really behind Frank was as big a mentor as anybody because he let me hang around and get started in radio.
Yes.
So I always like to give him credit, and you knew that,
Mm-hmm.
but you had to track him down.
Yes. I think you had mentioned his name sometime before.
Okay.
Oh, you mentioned him in Lunch with a Legend.
Oh, okay.
You were recognized as a legend, and so I knew Steve. I was like, Steve Bertram, I got to find that person. So how I did that, I was like, I have no idea. So I Googled him, and I found this. I was like, Steve Bertram radio station. Found something with call letters and like a high school thing from like years ago.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, well, that's got to be the place John was talking about. So I call, and somebody picks up it was just like they were nonchalant answering the phone.
Sure.
And so then I was like, hey, I'm Brooke with Baylor, and I'm trying to track down blah, 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 and tell the whole story. And he's like, wait, what? And so
funny.
stops, holds on for a second, and that man had his phone number.
That's great.
And he goes, here, you can just call him. And I was like, what? Wow, you're the right person to answer the phone that day. And so I was able to call him and leave him a voicemail, and he called me back.
That's so funny.
Yeah, and then
Marty Brenneman.
Yeah,
good job there.
Yes, that one was, I emailed, and as someone who works in athletics, I was like, I know how annoying it is to get emails that don't apply to your area.
Yeah.
So I wrote out this really nice email explaining that I understand that, but I sent it to the Reds ticket office. And I was like, please, it was the only email I could find. I was like, please help. They forwarded it along. That's how amazing that was.
That's pretty cool.
They passed that along. And without ever telling me, and then one day I had a voicemail from Marty Brenneman on my phone, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I got to call you back right now." So that was really cool.
That's cool.
It was fun tracking them all down.
Yeah, you did some work there, tracking all those people down. So greatly appreciated. And so I can say from that angle how much I appreciate all your hard work. And
Thank you.
Many people could say the same thing. And we just appreciate everything you've done because you have, left a mark here at Baylor, and we appreciate it very much. You are a Baylor Bear.
Yes.
Yes. And we want you to come back and visit you and Brock often. And folks listening know that Brooke will be here for our 3 remaining home games tailgate shows. So come by the tailgate and say hello to Brooke. Yeah.
I would love to see you guys. And, John, it's been such a pleasure to work with you. People ask me all the time, you know John Morris? I'm like, yeah, I work with him every day. So thank you again just for this opportunity to be on the podcast, to remember all those amazing memories, and to make my last week here at Baylor a really special one.
Very good. Very good. We appreciate you. Best of luck to you and Brock. One more time, you've got one final read to do here, and then we'll let you go.
Are you interested in true crime, funny one-star reviews, or inspiring stories? What about the history of Waco or the famous people who have lived and worked here? All these and more are produced by Rogue Media Network. There are over 80 different shows, including this one, with more coming all the time. If there is a story to tell, Rogue Media Network is telling it. You can watch on YouTube or listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Very nice. One final thought that I just thought of. As you were reading that, you held the card up, and I see your wedding ring, your engagement ring.
Yes.
Remember, you were doing sidelines for us on an ESPN Plus broadcast.
It was the first time she made her appearance on TV.
That's right. The ring made an appearance, and I was doing play-by-play and made mention of that. Brooke, what is that on your left hand, on your finger? Which was really fun to do also on
It was
the air.
neat to cut that and send it to Brock.
That's
and he
cool.
was like, oh, my gosh. I can't
That's
believe.
fun. That's
So,
another example of the good times we've had working together.
Yes.
So thanks again. We appreciate it. Thanks for being our guest of honor this
crazy.
week. For the final time, for Brooke Bednarz, I'm John Morris. Thanks for listening to our Sikkim podcast, powered by Rogue Media Network.
You've been listening to the Sikkim Podcast, powered by Rogue Media Network. The Sikkim Podcast is a production of Baylor Athletics.